Hi, my name is Deepa Joshi. I go by DJ. I am a senior program manager in the office of the CTO in VMware. I'm also the co-lead for the Palo Alto chapter, as well as the cultural chair for our Pride ERG, which we lovingly call as PODS for Power of Difference. This is my story, and this is my personal experiences and beliefs. But yet, this is our story. I believe that all of us have a common thread of loss and gain, fear and courage, and the deep desire and fight to be accepted for who we really are. If I hurt anyone's sentiments, please know that that is completely unintentional. You might be wondering, why am I doing this? Why share such a personal story of my journey of growing up in India and coming out as a married Indian woman later in life? And I asked myself the same question when a voice inside me asked me to sign up and speak at the summit this year and share my story. The one thing it comes down to for me is representation. I did not know anyone who looked like me or shared similar cultural story, or anyone who was grappling with the emotions and confusion that I was. Even today, I know many who are on the same path as me, but I only know a handful of South Asian women. Having said that, though my experiences from an Indian woman's perspective, I do want to reach out to the South Asian men who might be struggling to exert their identity, as well as they also carry the same cultural burdens that I did. I will be talking about my journey in a few phases. The early years of adolescence and growing up in India, being a good girl, the catalyst that led to the transformation, the messy middle, and the coming out loud and proud. I will also be sharing some of my personal beliefs and lessons that got me through the toughest days. One of the ways I found anchor is in online quotes on social media, believe it or not. These were little nuggets of wisdom that carried me forward on a daily basis. I share some of these with you in the following pages on the slides. And if, well, as far as the copyright of these, remain with whoever created or posted these in the first place. If I have any references to articles that I've borrowed wisdom from, those are listed in the reference section and are great reads for anyone wanting to dwell deeper into the subject. Throughout this presentation, if I look at my notes, it's because I hated rote memory, and that did not really serve me well in my Indian education system, but more so because I want to make sure I don't miss out on some important points. Please feel free to share your experiences and thoughts in the discussion board. I would love to hear more about your journey and if my journey resonates with yours in any way. I will be checking the discussion boards periodically throughout the 5 days of the summit and as work permits. Also, I have a document on resources that I will be putting up on the summit page for anyone who is questioning or in the process of coming out, or if you know anybody who's struggling or who needs support, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. Lastly, I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to my story. For time is the only gift we can give another. I truly believe that. I also want to applaud you for being the genuinely amazing beings that each one of you are, and for your courage and showing up and making a difference, and for lighting the way for those that follow. Enough of the housekeeping. Now let's talk about me, which, by the way, is not like me. I, in all vulnerability, have to admit that this is not easy, but this is the right thing to do. India, as many of you know, is a very complex and diverse society. Those who have grown up in India or live there today know that as beautiful and rich as a glorious past is, the present straddles between the struggles of the past and the aspirational direction of the future. And if that is not complex enough, we also have what I call dueling cultures. Not only dual as in two, but dueling as in the battle of two cultures. Imagine being born in a country that boasts the rich history of civilization after civilization that worshipped art and beauty and nature. This is the place that gave birth to the Kama Sutra and the temples of Khajuraho with their rather explicit depiction of human desire. An article from HRC on the stance of Hinduism on the LGBTQ states that the Hindu American Foundation, in its policy brief, notes that Hinduism does not provide a fundamental spiritual reason to reject or ostracize LGBTQ individuals. In fact, the Vedic culture allowed transgender people of the third sex to live openly according to their gender identity. The Kama Sutra, a Hindu text detailing the pleasures of sexuality, states the same-sex experience is to be engaged in and enjoyed for its own sake as one of the arts. Yet there is this other part of this culture that does not believe in talking about sexuality at all, and especially homosexuality. The idea of delinking sexuality in general from the holiness was first seen with the monastic orders, which saw sex as essential, a constituent of nature for procreation, but as an obstacle for liberation from the worldly life. The unwelcoming of LGBTQ people often reflected attitudes imported from conquering nations like the British Empire, which left some archaic rules that finally in September 2018 were unanimously ruled out by the Supreme Court of India. That's the India of today. But the India I grew up in was this in the 80s. I was born in a middle-class Hindu family. My parents were devout Hindus, but liberal in their mindset. Growing up in the 80s, I was not aware of what the word gay or homosexual meant. I was expected to marry a man, and dating was not looked upon favorably. The media and arts did not depict sexual actions, and even kissing was depicted with two flowers touching each other. That's the world I grew up in. My dad, at a young age, had to shoulder the responsibility of taking care of his 7 siblings. After their untimely death, my mom, who grew up in riches, chose willingly and happily to support him and the family. My parents are my role models. They were hardworking, honest, rule-abiding, and God-abiding, loving couple who loved and respected each other and provided for others without any complaints. We were raised to respect elders and take care of our responsibilities seriously. I was the youngest of 3 daughters. Growing up, as far as I can remember, I was always a tomboy. I always had short hair and played with boys, and my favorite things to do was climb trees and play with my favorite Meccano set, read adventure books of kids going and solving mysteries. And our parents gave us the freedom to be who we were, and somehow they had managed to show us what boundaries we should not cross without ever really lecturing us about it. This was also the time of MTV, and the exposure to the Western world was growing. I love music, and had posters of Madonna and Wham and others in my room, and even managed to get away with a half-naked poster of Samantha Fox, the British porn star turned singer of the Touch Me song Frame. And turns out she's a lesbian. Well, this is the environment I grew up in. It was strict, yet loving, but definitely not stifling. Most of us remember our first love. And I do too. And yes, it was a girl in my class. I was 15, and until then had not given much thought to sexuality or finding a boyfriend or anything as such, as that was encouraged, highly not encouraged in any way. But boy, when I saw her bells chime, then something stirred deep inside that I did not recognize. I did not know or understand what was happening, but all I could do was want to spend time with her and be as close to her as possible, even playing footsie in class. My first kiss was with this girl. The rule follower in me convinced myself that she was not a boy, and hence, being intimate with a boy before marriage was not allowed, so this was okay. Oh, how I wanted to live my life with her and have kids and have my life together with her. My limited scientific brain even drew out on a piece of paper how two women with only X chromosomes could have a girl child together. Oh, the thrills and innocence of adolescence. But alas, like all first loves and love stories, mine came to a crashing halt when she decided to run away with a boy, and her parents came to my house thinking I had helped them elope. For the first time, my heart was crushed, and I was made aware that what I wanted was not something normal or accepted. And so I tucked away my attraction to girls deep inside and continued to play my good girl part. A lot of us, women and men, have been raised to be dutiful children. Regardless of where you grew up or under which religious influence, girls are taught from a young age to grow up, marry a good man, raise a family while supporting their husbands. It is instilled hard in our psyche that others' happiness comes before our own. The years that followed, I busied myself with studies and work like the good, responsible girl I was supposed to be. I've always gotten along great with boys and had more male friends than females, as it was easier for me to be with men, as there was no sexual tension there. With women, however, I felt weird if someone sat even too close to me, and all my senses jumped into hyperdrive. Also, I thought women were more drama and men were just easy to get along with. I went to Switzerland to study and then came to the US. All along those years, I did not have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And even if I had any crushes, I made sure that they were either very far away or completely unattainable. I guess I was not ready to dig deep and understand what I really wanted. And somewhere inside, I knew exactly what I wanted and felt how unfeasible that was. Now, the next part of the story is where I guess what one calls fate or divine timing comes into picture, where fate takes your hand and leads you down a path that you were not planning for. In late 2000, I went back to India after 3 years to attend my sister's wedding. And she had met a boy. She was living in Australia. She had met a boy. They've fallen in love. And they were back in India for a full traditional Indian wedding. I used to work hard and long hours when I was in New York. And so I was really looking forward to a small vacation, meeting up with family and my best friends. Little did I know I would come back married. I was always thought of the kinds who would have a love marriage and not an arranged marriage, as they say in India. Basically, meaning I would not settle for a boy that my parents chose for me. After my sister's wedding was over, my parents asked me if I had anyone back in the US I was interested in. They were like, listen, you are 26, you're the youngest, you live far away, and we would be happy if you had somebody with you. Since I didn't have anybody, I let my dad sign me up in a marriage bureau where they have list of all eligible girls and boys. It's pretty common in India. I only agreed because I just wanted to keep my dad happy, but the only thing on my mind really was hanging out with my friends and making the most of my small vacation that I had. It just so happened that there was this one guy who was visiting my hometown from California at the same time and came from a reputed family. My parents insisted I meet him, so I agreed. I said, this is the one and only boy I will meet, and that's it. As fate would have it, our parents really hit it off, and before either of us knew it, we were planning to get engaged, and then that engagement turned into a wedding. And mind you, he was not there to get married either. He was there to attend his friend's wedding. So neither of us was really ready for this. We met for the first time and got married all within 9 days. My friends even wanted to check him out to see who was this guy Deepa was marrying. One, arranged, and two, in such a short period of time. In later years, we actually used to laugh about how crazy and risky that move was, and that thankfully neither of us turned out to be psycho or weirdo. My marriage was a good one. He is a decent, good man, and I have nothing against him. As in, he did not make me gay. And not that anyone can, and we all know that. I loved him, but I was not in love with him. We were better friends than lovers. We have two amazingly beautiful children, and I think that is the reason that fate brought us together. We were married for 15 years when I came out, and 17 by the time we were divorced. Though my marriage was good from the outside, it was white picket fence, wonderful marriage. I was not happy emotionally. I did not realize that until much later. My ex-husband had hobbies that were solitary pursuits, and I was the one busy with the kids and the work and the home. Now looking back, it was very clear to me that I was not putting myself first and taking care of others over my own needs. And then it happened again. The lightning bolt struck. Um, to this day, I remember the exact place when I saw her. I remember her, she was leaning against a table with the sun behind her in a floral skirt, and I lost a breath somewhere there. I know I can't see you all, but I wish I could see you raise a hand if you had fallen in love with a best friend. I did, for the second time. I should have learned the first time around, but I guess the universe was telling me something else. She was not only a good friend, but someone who leaned on me for support as she faced her challenges, and I relished playing the role of the knight in shining armor. I was very clear that I did not want to cheat on my marriage, so I did not do anything inappropriate. I was living in two worlds. I was living in this la la land, and then I was living in this real world with responsibilities. In March 2013, I got a call that as I was about to start my workday that every child dreads. My dad called to say that my mom had an aneurysm burst and was in coma, and I should fly back home immediately if I wanted to see her. They did not know if she would recover or not. She had been healthy, and so this was a huge shock. My mom was my best friend, and I could not imagine losing her. The flight to India is a good long 22-hour, 25-hour flight, and I was used to doing that. But this one, by far, was the longest flight I've ever been on. March is not a peak time for travel to India, so the flights were not full. And I remember being curled up on the 3-seat section on both flights, all the way through, not knowing what to expect when I landed. My mom fought hard for a month, but never really regained consciousness. My mom's death was a rude awakening from the universe. All of a sudden, I was hyper aware of my own mortality and the fragility of life. Here one day, gone tomorrow. Therapy ensued, as well as more questioning of, am I happy and is this my life? That same year, my friend who I was enamored with got married to a man, and that was the second time when I was aware that what I really deeply wanted was not acceptable in the world I lived in. They say the throat chakra relates to communication and the ability for you to understand and speak your inner truth. When out of balance, one has difficulty staying true to themselves and expressing needs, desires, and opinions with themselves and others. So it is no surprise that when I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's autoimmune disease, the year I got married, and my not speaking my truth manifested itself into throat cancer in 2015. If I was not already questioning my mortality, here I was now with cancer, struggling to find the meaning of all that it meant and why once again I was being reminded that life was short. By God's grace, the cancer was removed and I've been cancer free since. And if the cancer was not enough, fate had something else in mind. 2 days before my surgery to take my thyroid out, my dad passed away suddenly as he was recovering from a knee replacement surgery, which is pretty routine. My dad was my rock, and the floor gave way beneath me. I don't know where I summoned the strength to go through my own surgery and grieve my dad at the same time. I now think it was only the thought of my kids that I wanted to live and fight for. 2015 saw me fall into a depression, though I did not realize that at the time. I struggled with finding my voice and came across Brené Brown's TED Talks on vulnerability and shame, and I highly recommend them to anybody who has not seen them. Something clicked. It is okay to want something for myself and be vulnerable about it. I came face to face with my own feelings and had to reckon them. When I expressed those feelings to my friend, she flatly rejected them and any acceptability for my emotions. That was the last straw and the catalyst and the final catalyst that I needed to start my transformation. Once I acknowledged that something is not in place and the alignment in my life, I set on a search to get to the bottom of it, which is so typically me. With great trepidation and shame, I searched the net for how do I know I'm gay? Read articles and found books that shed more light on it. I have shared some of these in the resources. I came across a discussion board by Joanne Fleischer called For Married Women Coming Out of the Closet and a Lavender Visions blog. I suddenly felt seen and that I was not alone. Joanne did workshops at the time, and so I reached out to her in April of 2016 for a workshop that she was doing in May that year. She said that that was the last one she was doing, and so if I wanted to work with her, this was the only chance. For the first time in our 15-year marriage, I lied to my then husband that I had to go to Philly for work on a weekend. I remember clearly that Saturday morning walking into that Planned Parenthood where they had the workshop and was greeted by cops and protesters because, as it turns out, that was their Saturday for protests. I was like, here I am already nervous and not knowing what to expect and to be welcomed at this protest. Needless to say, I was superbly nervous as I walked into the room. It was a big room with, 3 windows along the walls, about 20 or so chairs that were arranged in a circle. You could still hear the protesters outside, but what caught my attention were the women in the room. I saw that each one in her own right, beautiful and smart, accomplished, yet struggling like I was with the same questioning and fears. I was not alone. I realized that I was definitely not going crazy. That night, Joanne had us do some introspection work. And for the first time, I acknowledged to myself and came out to myself, which I know a lot of you know is the hardest thing possible. It was hard, so I had to write it down in my notebook. I'm a lesbian, and I promptly covered it and posted it because I was still ashamed of it. That weekend, I felt like I had come home to my tribe, my Lavender sisterhood. Most of us who were in that workshop that weekend are still in touch with each other and a witness to how beautifully each one has blossomed since that fateful weekend. That weekend was also what Hindus and Buddhists celebrate as Buddha's full moon night, the night of his awakening. I woke up that night too. I felt an immense amount of gratitude and like a very heavy burden was lifted off my shoulders. as I lovingly looked at the moon from my plane window as I headed back to Cali. As part of the coming up process, I forgot. I got myself a motorcycle, something I always wanted. This gave me a sense of freedom that I needed. And I also got myself a tattoo. It is a phoenix. It's me symbolically rising from my ashes and the unraveling of my life. I still remember it was on July 4th that year, and it was my Independence Day. And with every prick of the needle, I let go of the pain from the past and was getting ready for what the future had to offer. The next couple of years were some of the hardest. I was not raised to think about my own happiness, so putting that first was hard. My ex-husband, like a typical Indian man, did not take my coming out well. He felt hurt and betrayed, and rightly so, and it pained me to hurt a good man. But I could no longer live a lie and put him through worse hell. I came out to my sisters, who were very supportive and accepting, but worried about the impact on the kids. My kids, then 12 and 6, had seen us both fight a lot, but still telling them we were separating was probably one of the hardest things that I've done. For many reasons, it took me another year to actually move out of the family home and start the grueling process of filing for divorce. Culturally, divorce is a no-no, especially if you have kids. We were both raised that way. So the idea itself was daunting. He even suggested that we still stay married for the next 10 years till my youngest went off to college. As hard as the decision was, I knew I could not carry out the pretense any longer. I also believe that as a parent, it is my duty to teach my children what is follow the right path, not the easy path in life. And that a happy parent, even if they were in two different households, is better than an unhappy marriage and an unhealthy atmosphere that two unhappy couple make together. The divorce process itself was super messy. He fought me tooth and heart for the custody and the house, but somehow eventually we managed to come to some agreement that was mutual. I know many women who feel guilty of breaking up the family and they'd settle for much less than is their right. I was one of them, but thankfully I had a lawyer who would not let me give up my rights out of guilt. I had firm belief that when I took that leap, my parachute would show up, and not just any parachute, a rainbow parachute would appear and I would land safely. I did not need to know the entire journey, but just the next baby step. That was a hard lesson for somebody who liked to plan everything. I was not dating anyone or had any lover as I was leaving my husband. So I used to tell him that I don't care if another woman wants to be with me, an older Indian woman with kids or not, but at least when I die, I would die knowingly that I lived authentically without any regrets. While all this was going on the home front, once I came out to my ex-husband in 2016, I was keen on discovering myself. I got myself a fake FB account. As it turned out, I had a lot of shame and I was still married, so I was not ready to put my real Facebook account, and joined an online support group for lesbians coming out later in life. And that turned out to be another tribe that really held my hand as I navigated the next few years of choppy waters. I made a profile on Match.com and made my first foray into lesbian dating. Growing up in India, I had not really dated men or women. And so this whole dating scene was all new to me. I joined a few meetups to meet some local lesbians, as I didn't even have any gay friends at the time. I even created a separate Netflix account so I could watch the L Word and lesbian movies in the guest bedroom that I had moved out to after coming out to my ex-husband. There was a whole new world out there that I still needed to discover. The second time that I felt at home was when I went to my first San Francisco Dyke March in 2017. San Francisco Pride March is on the last Sunday in June, but the Saturday before is when the Dykes March. I was nervous on my way there, but once I walked onto Dolores Park on that beautiful, bright, sunny day, all I could see was a sea of dykes and supporters, and I knew I was in the right place. These were my people. My divorce finally came through in September of 2018, and I finally felt free to be authentically me. That year, on an impulse, and motivated by another friend who came out on Facebook that year, I decided to not hide anymore. I came out on Facebook on National Coming Out Day, October 11, 2018, to the tune of I'm Coming Out. Coming out had its own implications. I got calls and loving notes from people I least expected, and I lost friends that I thought were closest. Those who love you for who you are, not your preferences, and this journey really teaches you who is in your corner. When this journey is hard and it's not an easy one, people who have not navigated coming out and going against heteronormative norms do not realize the sacrifices and losses that happen on the way. If the lows are low, the highs are high. By far, the greatest joy is living your authentic life on a daily basis. There is no more straddling the fence or living two lives and carrying that heavy burden of guilt and shame, but showing up just as you are and giving a hoot to what the world thinks. My children handled the transition pretty well, better than I expected, actually. There is still work that needs to be done, but all in all, my ex-husband and I co-parent the children, and they know they are loved deeply by both parents. My ex-husband and I now have a decent, civil, and almost friendly relationship. I now own my own place, and for the first time, I feel grounded. I now have an amazing woman in my life as my partner who has given up a lot to be with me and the kids, and I'm grateful for finding this love. She is the wind beneath my wings. If anyone had told me that this would be my life 4 years ago, I would not have believed them. The joys of coming out and living authentically are so much more precious than one can ever imagine at the beginning of this journey. I say it's pretty much like childbirth. The joy of holding your baby is worth all the labor pains. My coming out also has allowed some dear ones around me the confidence to explore their own paths and come out of the closet. If I can even support one person to live their life authentically, I would consider my life successful. And lastly, I want to thank VMware, my company I work for allowing me to show up authentically at work every day. This is the first company that I am openly out at, and I love how inclusive and supportive our leadership and my peers are. And this has been a journey. So what I wanted to share also was what worked for me. Now, this may not work for you, but this is what I looked at and as my guiding principles or posts navigating this journey. Life is short. All you have is now. And finally, after a long time, Eckhart Tolle's power of now is making sense to me. Take baby steps. Don't expect change to happen overnight. Change never does. It will take its own time. I kept hearing, trust the process. And I never really understood that until I went through this journey. Trust the process really means have faith in whatever you believe in, your divine, your God, your universe, and that everything has its own timing, like the blooming of a flower. You try to rush it, it's going to break. So trust God, trust universe, and that God allows U-turns. You don't have to sit with a decision that you made, knowing it's wrong, just because you made it. It's never too late to live your own life. And when you do decide to do that, your rainbow parachute or your road or whatever you want will appear before you, maybe one step at a time. It's like the headlights of a car. You don't have to see the entire way from here to your destination, but as long as you can see the next 100 feet, it will show the road. And the biggest thing, I think the lesson for me as somebody who was a people pleaser was I'm not responsible for somebody else's emotions. As hard as it may be to grapple with that, people are responsible for their emotions and their own growth. And it is important to put your own oxygen mask first. Take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of others. And of course, regardless of how dark the night is or how painful it seems, there is always place for gratitude. There is always, always, always something to be grateful for. And there's always the sun shining behind those dark clouds, even if you don't see it. And finally, I'm grateful and thankful for all of you and wishing you the very best of love and peace in your own lives. Enjoy the summit and the rest of this crazy year that has been, and wishing you the very best in your lives. Thank you. I also want to share, as I mentioned, there are some references here which will also be on the site. There are some resources, some books, and some blogs and podcasts. And there's a lot more information there now today than there was 4 years ago. And of course, I would love to stay connected with you. Reach out to me. I'm happy to help anyone in whatever capacity I can. And again, thank you for listening. Enjoy the summit. NamasGay.